Whatever happens tonight, do not take that patch off. My mother said it like she was warning me about a gas leak instead of a 2-inch square of medical adhesive stuck below my collarbone. I stared at her in the mirror of the guest suite at Bennett Manor, where my sister was getting married in less than an hour, and apparently my most urgent responsibility was remaining properly stickered. Good morning to you too, Mom. She ignored that. Of course she did. Her fingers hovered near my collar, checking that the scent-blocking patch was still hidden beneath my white dress shirt. Noah, I am serious. You have mentioned that 6 times. 3. 6 emotionally. I adjusted my navy tie and tried not to look as uncomfortable as I felt. At 25, I had a job, an apartment, health insurance, and a perfectly respectable collection of unpaid parking tickets. Yet every time I came home, my parents transformed me into a fragile 12-year-old who apparently could not survive a room containing alphas without written instructions and emergency supplies. I had been told my whole life that I was a beta with an unusually sensitive system. Too many strong scents gave me headaches. Crowded pack events made me dizzy. Formal gatherings required blockers, medication, and enough parental supervision to qualify as a small government program. I had stopped questioning it years ago. Mostly. I know how to manage myself, I said. Mom's expression softened for half a second. I know. She did not sound convinced. The bedroom door opened, and my sister Claire swept inside in her wedding dress, trailing satin, perfume, and the kind of happiness that made everyone else in the room look temporarily underdressed. There you are, she said. I have been looking everywhere for my favorite brother. I am your only brother. Do not ruin this for me. She hugged me carefully, avoiding her veil. Over her shoulder, I caught Mom checking my collar again. Wonderful. Nothing said family bonding like covert medical surveillance. Claire pulled back and studied my face. You okay? Perfect. Mom has only inspected me like airport security. She does that because she loves you. That sentence has defended a lot of questionable behavior throughout history. Claire laughed, and Mom gave me the look. The Bennett look. Patent pending. Claire linked her arm through mine and dragged me toward the hall before I could make things worse. Downstairs, the estate had been transformed into something out of a wedding magazine. White roses climbed the staircase. Soft music drifted through open doors. Waiters moved between guests carrying champagne, and sunlight poured through the tall ballroom windows onto polished floors. I had been home less than 20 minutes and already wanted a nap. Then we reached the ballroom entrance. Claire immediately turned toward her fiancé, Andrew Mercer, who stood near the front speaking with a small group of guests. One of them was a man I did not recognize. Tall, late 20s, dark suit, brown hair brushed neatly back, calm posture, the kind of person who looked as though awkward conversations simply apologized and left before reaching him. Claire whispered something about seating arrangements, but I stopped listening because the stranger suddenly went still. He had been talking to Andrew. Then his sentence simply ended. His head turned toward me. Slowly. Precisely. Our eyes met from across the ballroom. I glanced behind myself. Nobody there. Great. So this was definitely happening to me. The man's expression changed. Not attraction. Not confusion. Recognition. That made even less sense. I had never seen him before. At least, I was almost sure I had not. A strange pressure settled beneath my ribs. Then came something even stranger. For the first time in my life, I could clearly smell someone from across a crowded room. Cedar. Clean rain. Something cool and sharp underneath. My hand moved instinctively toward the hidden patch beneath my shirt. Across the ballroom, the stranger's eyes followed the movement. His face lost every trace of casual politeness. Beside me, Mom inhaled sharply. I looked at her. She was staring at him too. Mom. She caught my wrist. Noah, stay here. Why? She did not answer. The stranger handed his glass to a passing waiter and started walking toward us. Claire looked between us, completely confused. Do you know Lucas Hayes? She asked. I barely heard her. Lucas stopped about 6 feet away. His gaze went first to my face, then briefly to the place where the blocker was hidden, then back to my eyes. For one long second, nobody spoke. Finally, Lucas said very quietly, "Who told you that you were supposed to wear that?" I stared at Lucas for a second, then at my mother, then back at Lucas. That is a surprisingly personal opening question. Claire looked between us. Should I know why this is weird? No, Mom said immediately. Lucas answered at the same time. Maybe. Fantastic. Nothing improved a wedding morning like synchronized secrecy. I pulled my wrist free from Mom's hand and adjusted my cuff. My doctor told me to wear it. Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly. Which doctor? The one with a medical degree, presumably. Noah. My mother's warning tone arrived right on schedule. I ignored it. Lucas did not smile, but something in his expression softened. I'm not trying to embarrass you. You were doing excellent work accidentally. Behind him, Andrew called Lucas's name, but Lucas barely glanced back. Claire leaned closer to me. Do you want me to get Dad? Absolutely not. That was apparently the correct answer because Mom looked offended. The ceremony began before anyone could continue the interrogation. Claire was pulled away by two bridesmaids. Andrew disappeared toward the front, and Mom gave me one last look that clearly translated to do not make this complicated. As if I had personally scheduled the mysterious man staring at my medical patch. I took my seat near the aisle and tried to focus on my sister. I really did. Claire looked happy. Andrew looked terrified in the endearing way grooms were apparently supposed to look. Everyone stood, sat, smiled, whispered, and cried at the socially appropriate moments. Meanwhile, the patch under my collarbone started to feel warm. At first I assumed nerves. Then the warmth became a persistent prickling sensation. I shifted in my chair. The roses near the altar suddenly smelled stronger. Not just floral. I could separate them somehow. White roses. Gardenias. Eucalyptus. Someone 3 rows behind me wore citrus cologne. A woman across the aisle had lavender perfume. Somewhere nearby, somebody had bourbon in a glass they were definitely not supposed to have during the ceremony. I blinked. What was happening? By the time the reception started, the ballroom had become unbearable. Every scent seemed to arrive separately, sharp and detailed, while conversations layered over one another until I could pick out individual voices from 20 feet away. I touched the patch through my shirt. Hot. Definitely hot. You look pale, Claire said as she passed me near the cake table. I am always pale. Paler. Very supportive distinction. She frowned. Do you need air? Actually, yes. I escaped before Mom could notice and pushed through the terrace doors. Cool evening air hit my face. Better. Much better. I walked to the stone railing overlooking the gardens and breathed slowly. The estate grounds stretched below in neat rows of hedges and string lights. For about 30 seconds, I convinced myself I was fine. Then the terrace door opened. I did not have to turn around. Cedar. Rain. Lucas. The fact that I knew that before seeing him was deeply concerning. If you followed me to ask about my medical accessories again, I said, I charge consultation fees. Lucas stopped several feet away. I followed because you looked like you needed help. I needed air. That too. I turned toward him. Why are you so interested in this patch? His eyes moved briefly toward my collar. Because I know what kind it is. A scent blocker. Yes. Mystery solved. Not exactly. He paused. Those blockers are stronger than what most betas would ever need. My stomach tightened. Most betas? Noah. Who gave it to you? My family doctor. Who told you that you needed it? My parents. Doctors. Everyone. Lucas watched me carefully. And why? Because I am sensitive around alphas. That is what they told you. Something about the way he asked made me defensive. Yes. Did you ever question it? Not until a stranger started conducting a medical audit at my sister's wedding. Lucas exhaled quietly and looked toward the gardens. For a moment, I thought he might drop it. Then he turned back. I can smell you through the blocker. My pulse skipped. That sounds less like my problem. It becomes your problem if nobody told you what the blocker is actually hiding. The terrace suddenly felt colder. What are you talking about? Lucas stepped no closer. His voice stayed calm. That patch is not hiding a sensitive beta scent. I stared at him. He held my gaze. It is hiding an alpha. For about 3 seconds, I considered every possible response to that sentence, and somehow none of them were useful. No, I said finally. Lucas did not move. No, as in that is not true. I am a beta. My voice sounded firmer than I felt, which was something. I have been a beta my entire life. There were tests, doctors, forms, annoying conversations about sensitivity. So unless you have recently become a licensed specialist in secret identity emergencies, I think we are done here. Lucas looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he nodded once. All right. That threw me off. All right. You do not have to believe me. Good. But you should pay attention to what happens around you. I folded my arms. That sounds suspiciously philosophical. It is practical. The terrace door opened behind us. A man in a charcoal suit stepped outside, one of Andrew's friends from college, if I remembered correctly. I had seen him during the ceremony. Confident. Loud. Definitely alpha. He walked toward the railing while checking his phone, then glanced up at me. His expression shifted for half a second. The change was tiny, but now that Lucas had told me to look, I saw it. His shoulders relaxed. His voice lowered when he said, "Sorry, did not mean to interrupt." Then he moved to the far side of the terrace. I stared after him. What was that? Lucas answered quietly. He adjusted his presence. Because he is polite? Maybe. Another guest stepped outside a moment later, an older alpha woman carrying a champagne flute. She looked at Lucas first, completely normal. Then at me. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. She slowed, gave me more room than necessary, and continued past without comment. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That does not prove anything. I know. You keep saying that. Because I am not trying to force you into an answer. I looked at him. Then what are you trying to do? Lucas's expression softened. Get you to ask the right questions. I hated that answer mostly because it sounded reasonable. I turned back toward the gardens and pressed my palms against the cool stone railing. The scents were still there. Flowers. Cut grass. Champagne. Lucas's cedar and rain presence several feet behind me. I could identify each one separately now, like someone had turned up a sense I had never known existed. This is probably the patch malfunctioning, I said. That would explain the irritation. It would not explain alpha recognition. Maybe they are reacting to you. They already know what I am. I closed my eyes. Excellent. My denial was running out of affordable explanations. You said you can smell me through the blocker. Yes. What does that mean exactly? It means the blocker is weakening, and whatever it was designed to suppress is becoming noticeable. Whatever. Lucas let the word sit there. I turned toward him. Say I believed you for 30 seconds. All right. Why would my parents hide something like that? He hesitated. I do not know. That is not very helpful. It is honest. Fair. Annoyingly fair. Before I could respond, the terrace door opened again. My mother stepped outside, scanning the space until she found me. Relief crossed her face first. Then she saw Lucas. That relief vanished. Noah, she said, come inside. I did not move. Why? You need to replace your patch. Lucas's gaze sharpened. I touched the warm adhesive beneath my shirt. I thought this one lasted all day. It usually does. Usually? Her eyes flicked toward Lucas. That was enough. Something inside me shifted from confusion to suspicion. Mom, what exactly is this patch blocking? Her face went still. I waited. The terrace seemed to hold its breath with me. Noah, not here. There it was. Not an answer. Never an answer. I looked at Lucas. He said nothing. He did not need to. You do not have to believe me. Start by believing what you can see. I turned back to my mother. I am going to find out what this is. She stepped closer. Please do not make a scene. I am not. My voice came out surprisingly calm. I am going to my room. I am going to find the packaging for this patch, and I am going to read it myself. Noah. And if nobody wants to tell me the truth, I will start with whatever you forgot to hide. For the first time that day, my mother looked afraid. I left the terrace before my mother could stop me, crossed the ballroom without looking at anyone, and headed upstairs toward the family guest suites with the strange certainty that if I slowed down, somebody would find a new reason why I was not allowed to know my own life. The music faded behind me. So did the laughter. By the time I reached the room where Mom had helped me get ready earlier, my hands were shaking hard enough to make the door handle feel complicated. Excellent, I muttered. 25 years old and defeated by basic hardware. I got inside, closed the door, and went straight to the dresser where she had kept the extra patches. The first drawer held cuff links, sewing supplies, and enough emergency tissues to survive several emotional weddings. The second had medication packets, all sealed in plain white envelopes. No pharmacy name. No instructions. Nothing useful. Of course, I whispered. Apparently transparency had never made the Bennett packing list. I opened the third drawer and found an old leather photo album underneath a folded shawl. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I noticed a silver emblem pressed into the cover. A circle crossed by 3 narrow lines. I knew that symbol. Every child in our community did. Alpha Youth Registry. My stomach tightened. The album opened with a soft crackle. Photographs from ceremonies, family gatherings, Formal dinners. Claire at 10. Me at 7. Dad looking younger and somehow equally disappointed by neckties. Then I turned another page and stopped breathing. I was 12 years old in the photograph, standing beneath a banner at a youth designation ceremony in Baltimore. My hair was too long. My suit was terrible. My smile looked nervous. None of that mattered. Pinned to my collar was a small silver alpha insignia. I touched the picture with one finger. No. The word barely came out. There was writing beneath the photograph in my mother's handwriting. Noah Bennett. Primary alpha presentation confirmed. Age 12. The room tilted without actually moving. Every doctor's visit. Every blocker. Every time my parents told me crowded alpha spaces were dangerous because I was an unusually sensitive beta. I turned the page too quickly. Another photograph showed me at the same ceremony, sitting near a hallway window with a bottle of water in my hands. Someone stood several feet away, partly outside the frame. A teenage boy. Dark hair. Familiar posture. My heart stumbled. Before I could look closer, the bedroom door opened. Mom froze when she saw the album in my hands. Neither of us spoke. Her face told me everything before her mouth had the chance to lie. I held up the photograph. How long? She closed the door slowly. Noah, do not. My voice surprised both of us. It was not loud. It was steady. Do not tell me this is complicated. Do not tell me tonight is not the right time. Just answer one question. I pointed at the silver insignia on my 12-year-old chest. How long? Mom looked suddenly exhausted. You presented when you were 12. The sentence was quiet enough to disappear beneath the distant wedding music. I stared at her. As an alpha. She nodded. Something inside me went completely still. Then why do I remember being told I was a beta? Her eyes filled with regret. Because after your presentation, things happened very quickly. What things? People started asking about you. Families we barely knew. Representatives. Advisors. Everyone wanted to know what kind of alpha you would become. I was 12. I know. Her voice cracked. That was why we were frightened. I looked back at the photograph. A 12-year-old kid wearing a designation everyone else apparently understood better than he did. So you changed it. Not immediately. When? She hesitated. That hesitation felt like another locked door. When you were 13, your father and I found a specialist who could suppress your sin expression. We removed your name from the private registry and told everyone. Your initial designation had been incorrect. I laughed once, but there was nothing funny in it. You corrected me. We protected you. I looked at her. You told me I was someone else. Mom stepped closer, then stopped when I instinctively moved back. For once, she respected the distance. We thought if the alpha designation disappeared, people would leave you alone. I lowered my eyes to the album again. The boy in the photograph looked nervous, but he did not look weak. He did not look broken. He looked like me before somebody decided that being me was too dangerous to allow. I swallowed hard. Did Claire know? No. Did anyone tell her? Never. I nodded slowly. That mattered. Not enough, but it mattered. Then another thought arrived. Why did you keep doing it after I became an adult? Mom's expression changed. Very slightly. But I saw it. Fear. Not the old fear she had described. Something newer. Something connected to tonight. Mom. She looked toward the door. We should talk to your father. That is not an answer. Her silence stretched between us. I finally understood there was another truth waiting behind the first one. You started hiding me because you were afraid for me, I said. But that is not why you kept hiding me. Mom closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she whispered one word. Initially. Initially. The word sat between us like a door that had opened only an inch. What changed? I asked. Mom looked toward the hallway again, but this time I stepped between her and the door. Not aggressively. Just enough to make it clear that disappearing into another family meeting was not going to work anymore. Noah, your father should be here for this. Then call him. She did. 3 minutes later, Dad entered the room, still wearing the dark suit he had chosen for Claire's wedding, looking irritated until he saw the album in my hands. Then the irritation vanished. You found that. Sharp observation. Mom gave me a tired look. I was past caring. Dad closed the door. We wanted to tell you when things were calmer. When exactly was that scheduled? Before retirement or after? He exhaled through his nose. Noah, I am listening. Dad looked at Mom, then at me. When you first presented, the attention was immediate. Families contacted us. Advisors suggested partnerships. People spoke about your future as if it had already been negotiated. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the old fear underneath it. You were 12 years old. We hated it. So you erased me from the registry. We protected your childhood. By lying about what I was. Yes. The answer came so directly that it stopped me for a second. Dad continued. At first, that was the only reason. There it was again. At first. Initially, I stared at both of them. And later, neither answered. You know, this would be much easier if our family had a rewards program for honesty. Mom almost smiled, then looked away. Dad sat on the edge of the dresser. When Claire became engaged to Andrew Mercer, circumstances changed. My stomach tightened. What does Claire's engagement have to do with my designation? Dad's silence lasted exactly long enough to answer me without words. No, I said. Mom stepped closer. It is not what you think. That sentence has never improved anything. She folded her hands together. The Bennett family and the Mercers have been discussing a formal alliance for years. Claire and Andrew genuinely love each other. Their marriage is not arranged. Good. That is one normal thing today. But the marriage also allows both families to combine certain voting rights and business interests. I frowned. And Dad spoke this time. Your grandfather wrote an old provision into the Bennett family charter. If there is a recognized adult alpha heir, that person must approve any alliance that transfers family voting shares outside the Bennett line. I stared at him. Recognized adult alpha heir. Nobody moved. Meaning me. Mom nodded. The room suddenly felt smaller. So if I am officially a beta, nobody needs my approval. Dad looked down. Correct. I laughed softly because the alternative was saying something I would regret at my sister's wedding. That is incredibly convenient. Noah, Claire has spent years preparing for this partnership, Mom said. Andrew's family has too. And I spent years thinking I had a medical condition that made me weak. Her face fell. Good. I hated that I wanted the words to hurt, but I did. When I turned 18, you could have told me. We considered it. That is not the same as doing it. Dad stood. By then, the alliance discussions had already begun. Revealing your designation would have created uncertainty. I stared at him. Uncertainty for whom? He did not answer. Not for me, I said. You never even asked me. The music downstairs shifted into something brighter, and faint applause traveled through the floor. Somewhere below us, Claire was celebrating with people who had no idea her brother's entire identity had apparently become a legal inconvenience. Does she know? I asked. Mom answered immediately. No. Does Andrew? No. That mattered. I let out a slow breath. So Claire believes everything happening tonight is legitimate. It is legitimate, Dad said. I looked at him. Only because you made sure I did not legally exist as the person who could question it. He had no response to that. I touched the edge of the old photograph in my hand. 12-year-old me stared back from beneath the silver alpha pin, nervous and unaware of how many adults were about to decide what his life should look like. I am not ruining Claire's wedding, I said. Both my parents visibly relaxed. That made my decision immediate. Do not look relieved. They froze. I am protecting my sister. I am not protecting what you did. Mom whispered my name. I reached beneath my collar and touched the warm edge of the failing scent-blocking patch. For the first time in years, it did not feel like protection. It felt like permission I had never agreed to give. I am not replacing this tonight, I said. Dad's face changed. Noah, that could complicate everything. I looked straight at him. I think that is finally the point. My father stared at me as if I had just announced I was replacing the wedding cake with a tax audit. Noah, you do not understand what removing that patch could trigger. Then explain it. He opened his mouth, but Mom answered first. People will notice. I looked at her. That is becoming less frightening by the minute. Dad stepped toward the dresser and lowered his voice. There are representatives from several families downstairs. The Mercer alliance is supposed to be confirmed after the reception. If your designation becomes obvious before the signing, the trustees will have questions. Questions sound healthy. We should try them sometime. Mom pressed her lips together. This is not only about paperwork. No, apparently it is about years of making sure I could not participate in my own family. I took a slow breath and looked down at the old photograph again. The silver alpha pin caught the lamplight. I remembered nothing about wearing it, but suddenly I remembered fragments around it. A hotel hallway. Too many voices. My hands wrapped around a cold bottle of water. Someone sitting several feet away instead of crowding me. A boy with dark hair telling me I did not have to go back into the room until I was ready. The memory disappeared almost as quickly as it came. What happens if the alliance is not confirmed tonight? I asked. Dad hesitated. Nothing immediate. Meaning Claire stays married. Of course. Andrew stays her husband. Yes. Nobody loses their home. Nobody gets thrown out of the family, and civilization continues. Mom gave me a tired look. Noah, I am establishing scale. Dad sighed. The agreement would simply require review. I stared at him. So all this time, you were not protecting Claire's marriage. You were protecting everyone from paperwork. That is an unfair simplification. It is also apparently accurate. A knock sounded at the door. All three of us froze. Then Claire's voice came through. Why is my entire immediate family missing from my own reception? I closed my eyes briefly. Perfect timing. Mom moved toward the door, but I spoke first. Claire, give us 5 minutes. Silence. Is everything okay? I looked at my parents. Neither one seemed capable of answering. It will be, I said. Another pause. That sounds suspicious. Despite everything, I smiled. Runs in the family. Claire sighed from the hallway. 5 minutes. Then I am coming in wearing a wedding dress and making this everyone's problem. Her footsteps disappeared. I turned. Back to Mom and Dad. She deserves the truth. Mom shook her head. Not tonight. Why? Because she might make her own decision too? That landed. Dad looked away. I touched the patch beneath my collar again. The adhesive had started lifting at one corner from the heat. I did not pull it off. Not yet. I wanted one thing to be clear before I did anything irreversible. I am not stopping Claire's wedding. I am not demanding control of the Bennett Trust. I am not walking downstairs and making some dramatic announcement. Dad relaxed slightly. But I am also not signing anything, approving anything, or pretending I am a beta so your alliance paperwork stays convenient. His relief vanished. Better. The trustees can wait, I continued. Claire can celebrate. And tomorrow, I am getting independent testing from a doctor you did not choose. Mom's eyes filled. Noah, we never wanted you to hate us. The anger inside me shifted, not disappearing, just changing shape. I do not hate you. She looked surprised. I hate that you decided fear gave you permission to become the people making choices for me. Nobody spoke. Downstairs, applause rose again, followed by music and laughter. My sister's life was moving forward while mine seemed to be reopening from 12 years ago. Dad looked at the patch. If you remove it now, everyone downstairs may know what you are. I looked at him. You keep saying that like it is the worst thing that could happen. Then I carefully lifted the loose corner and peeled the patch away. Nothing dramatic happened. No thunder. No sudden transformation. Just cool air against skin that had been covered too long. Mom inhaled sharply. Dad went still. I waited. At first, I felt nothing. Then the world sharpened. The floral arrangements downstairs. Coffee from the service hall. Rain beginning somewhere beyond the open windows. And underneath all of it, faint but unmistakable, cedar. Lucas. I looked toward the door before I even understood why. A second later, someone knocked. Mom whispered, "Who is that?" I already knew. "Lucas," I said. Dad stared at me. "How could you possibly know that?" I looked down at the patch in my hand, then back at him. "I think that is the question you should have let me answer years ago." I opened the door before either of my parents could stop me. Lucas stood in the hallway with one hand lowered at his side, his expression calm but more serious than before. Behind him, the music from the reception drifted up the staircase, softened by distance. He looked at me once, then at the patch in my hand. Something in his face changed. Not surprise exactly. Confirmation. "You took it off," he said. Observant. My voice was steadier than I felt. "Apparently tonight is full of discoveries." Dad stepped closer behind me. "Why are you here?" Lucas looked past me at him. "Claire asked me to find Noah. She said everyone disappeared." That was believable. It was also not the whole reason. I could tell because Lucas looked back at me and lowered his voice. Then I noticed his scent change. Mom inhaled sharply again. I was starting to resent how often my existence made my parents breathe dramatically. "Can we talk somewhere else?" I asked. Lucas nodded immediately. No questions. No attempt to take charge. We walked farther down the hallway to a small sitting room overlooking the garden. I left the door open. Maybe because I wanted space. Maybe because after 12 years of secrets, closed doors suddenly annoyed me. Lucas remained near the window while I sat on the arm of a chair. You were right, I said. He did not look pleased about it. I appreciated that. Your parents told you? Eventually. Apparently, honesty requires several rounds of negotiation in my family. I looked down at the patch. I presented as an alpha when I was 12. They suppressed it when I was 13. Lucas went completely still. 12. That reaction is not comforting. I am sorry. He paused. I was trying to remember something. I looked up. What? His eyes narrowed slightly, not at me, but at the memory. Baltimore. My pulse changed. The photograph. The hallway. The dark-haired boy standing just outside the frame. You were at the ceremony, I said. Lucas stared at me. You remember? Not clearly. I leaned forward. There was a picture upstairs. I was sitting near a hallway window. Someone was standing. Nearby. Lucas let out a slow breath. That was me. The room seemed to become quieter. How old were you? 16. And I was 12. He nodded. You looked miserable. Apparently that was one of my strongest childhood skills. A small smile appeared, then faded. The main hall was crowded. You had left during the designation announcements. I found you sitting outside with your hands over your ears. The memory returned in pieces. Cold water bottle. Gray carpet. Too many scents. A voice telling me I did not have to explain anything. You gave me water. Yes. You stayed away from me. You asked me to. That mattered more than it should have. What did I say? Lucas looked at me for a long moment. You said you wished everyone would stop deciding what being an alpha meant for you. My throat tightened. Of course, 12-year-old me had apparently understood my life better than 25-year-old me. What happened after that? I asked. My family left the ceremony the next morning. A few weeks later, I tried to find your name on the event list because I wanted to know if you were okay. He shook his head. You were gone. My parents removed me from the registry. I know that now. You looked for me? Lucas gave a small, almost embarrassed shrug. For a while, I only knew your first name and that you were a Bennett. Then people told me your original designation had been recorded incorrectly. So you thought I was a beta. I thought maybe I remembered the whole thing wrong. He looked toward the hallway. Years passed. And tonight, I recognized your face first. That surprised me. Not my scent. The scent confirmed it. His expression softened. But I saw you walk into the ballroom and remembered the kid in Baltimore before I understood why. Something warm and uncomfortable moved through my chest. I immediately decided to blame stress. That is inconveniently sentimental. I can make it less sentimental if that helps. Please do. Lucas thought for a second. Your suit at 12 was terrible. I laughed before I could stop myself. There. Much better. For the first time that night, the room did not feel like it was closing around me. Lucas stepped no closer. He simply waited. What happens now? He asked. I looked down at the patch in my hand. My parents had spent years answering that question for me. Tonight, suddenly, nobody was. I do not know, I said. Then I looked at him. But I think I want that to be my decision. Lucas nodded once. Then it should be. The reception had shifted into that polished, late evening stage where everyone looked relaxed, but nobody important had actually stopped working. Claire and Andrew were laughing near the dance floor. Guests drifted between tables. And somewhere beyond the ballroom, doors a smaller group of relatives, trustees, and family representatives had started gathering for the alliance ceremony. I knew because my father found me within 4 minutes of my return downstairs. Apparently freedom came with excellent parental tracking. Noah, he said quietly, we need to discuss what happens next. I was hoping dessert happened next. He did not smile. The Hayes family is being called in. I glanced toward Lucas, who stood near the edge of the room speaking with an older man I assumed was his father. Why? Dad lowered his voice. There are additional partnership announcements tonight. Of course there were. God forbid anyone attend a wedding and simply eat cake. A few minutes later, Claire approached me, still glowing despite everything. Are you okay? She asked. I looked at her face and made a decision. I will be. But after tonight, we need to talk. Her smile faded slightly. That's serious? Very. She squeezed my hand. Then after tonight. That was Claire. No interrogation. No demand. Just trust. The alliance gathering took place in a private room beside the ballroom, smaller than I expected and far less dramatic than the phrase alliance ceremony deserved. Maybe 30 people. Family heads. Legal representatives. Trustees. A few designated heirs. I stood near the back because I had not been invited, technically, but nobody seemed willing to ask me to leave once my scent was no longer hidden. That was new. Also awkward. Lucas entered with his father and took a place near the center. My parents stood several yards away, visibly tense. The Mercer representatives were there too. I could feel attention moving toward me in small waves. Nobody said anything. Nobody had to. One of the Hayes advisors began speaking about future cooperation between families, shared interests, long-term partnerships. I understood maybe 60% of it. The other 40 sounded like rich people inventing elegant ways to avoid saying money. Then Lucas's father turned to him. Lucas, the Hayes position has always been that the next alliance should be chosen by the person expected to represent our family in the coming years. Lucas nodded. Yes. Then tonight, you may state your preference. Something changed in the room. A woman near the Mercer side smiled before Lucas even spoke. Apparently everyone except me knew what name was expected. Lucas looked at her briefly, then at his father, then his eyes found mine. Oh no, I had seen that expression before. Ballroom, terrace, hallway. The calm look of a man who had already made a decision and was simply waiting for the rest of the room to catch up. My preference is Noah Bennett, he said. Silence. Complete, immediate silence. My brain stopped functioning, then restarted badly. I looked behind myself out of instinct. Still nobody there. Great. Definitely me again. My father spoke first. That is not possible. Lucas turned toward him. Why? Dad's jaw tightened. Noah is not part of the alliance structure. Then that can be reviewed. He is a beta. There it was. The lie, spoken automatically, as if repetition might rebuild it. Lucas looked at him for a long second. His voice stayed perfectly calm. Then why are you afraid of him being chosen as an alpha? The room went still in a different way. My mother closed her eyes. One of the trustees looked sharply toward Dad. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I mostly felt tired. Lucas turned back to me before anyone else could speak. To be clear, he said, loud enough for the room to hear. I am not claiming a bond, a contract, or a decision Noah has not made. My pulse slowed slightly. I am choosing the opportunity to know him, if he wants the same. That mattered. More than the announcement. More than the stunned faces. More than the fact that my father looked like his entire evening had just been rewritten. Lucas was not deciding my future. He was making space for me inside the decision. His father studied him, then looked at me. And what does Noah say? Every eye in the room turned toward me. Fantastic. My least favorite childhood experience, public attention, now available in a premium adult version. I walked forward slowly until I stood several feet from Lucas. He did not reach for me. He simply waited. You choosing me does not mean you get to decide for me, I said. I know. You do not know what I am going to do about the Bennett Alliance. I know. I do not even know what I am going to do about being an alpha yet. His expression softened. I know. I narrowed my eyes. You are getting repetitive. A few people actually laughed. The tension broke just enough for me to breathe. Lucas smiled. Then tell me what I should know. I looked around the room, at my parents, at the trustees, at people who had apparently spent years discussing versions of my life I had never been invited to hear. Then I looked back at him. You can choose the chance to know me, I said. But whether I choose you back is mine. Lucas nodded once. That is exactly what I meant. And for the first time in my life, being chosen did not feel like being assigned. 3 weeks later, I learned that discovering your family had hidden your alpha identity for 13 years did not come with a convenient instruction manual. It came with appointments. So many appointments. Blood work, send evaluations, hormone panels, consultations, paperwork, and one extremely cheerful receptionist who kept calling my situation fascinating. I preferred confusing, personally. The independent clinic confirmed what everyone at the wedding had already figured out. I was an alpha. Fully, unmistakably, medically an alpha. The years of suppression had not erased that. They had only buried it under medication and blockers long enough for me to forget there had ever been anything underneath. Claire found out the truth the morning after the wedding. I told her everything over coffee while Andrew sat beside her looking increasingly horrified on my behalf. She cried. Then she got angry. Then she apologized for crying because, according to her, I was the one entitled to have the dramatic emotional breakdown. I told her I had scheduled mine for Thursday. The Mercer Alliance was placed under review. Claire and Andrew stayed married, happy, and irritatingly functional. The world did not end. Nobody lost their house. Civilization survived. My parents and I were not fixed. I was not sure fixed was even the right goal yet. Mom called every few days. Dad sent careful messages that sounded like they had been reviewed by 3 attorneys and a therapist. I answered when I wanted to. That was new too. Choice felt strange when you first started using it. I had also moved into a new apartment across town, partly because I wanted distance and partly because my old place had plumbing that sounded like a dying trombone at 2 in the morning. The new apartment had sunlight, a decent kitchen, and exactly 6 unpacked boxes I was pretending were furniture. On a Saturday morning, someone knocked on my door. I knew who it was before opening it. Cedar. Rain. Lucas. Apparently alpha senses were useful for identifying visitors and ruining surprise parties. I opened the door. He stood there in jeans, a gray sweater, and no formal family representatives whatsoever. In one hand, he held 2 coffees. In the other, nothing. I looked behind him. No lawyers. Not today. Trustees. I left them in the car. I stared at him. His mouth twitched. That was a joke. Good. I was about to move again. He handed me a coffee. Vanilla latte. I looked at the cup. How did you know? Claire. Traitor. Lucas stepped inside only after I moved aside. That small detail still mattered. He never assumed access. Never treated what happened at the wedding as permission for anything afterward. We sat near the window, where morning light stretched across the hardwood floor. On the kitchen counter sat the last and used scent-blocking patch my parents had given me. I had kept it for reasons I did not entirely understand. Maybe proof. Maybe habit. Maybe because throwing away something that had defined half my life felt strangely ceremonial. Lucas followed my gaze. You do not have to get rid of it because anyone expects you to. I know. I stood, picked it up, and turned it over between my fingers. Plain packaging. Nothing dramatic. Just a small object that had carried far too much authority. I dropped it into the trash. I wanted to. Lucas smiled quietly. No applause. No speech. Perfect. We went back to our coffee. After a minute, he said, "Can I ask you something? You appear physically capable. Would you like to have dinner with me?" I looked at him. That is different from choosing me at an alliance ceremony in front of 30 people. I was hoping for less paperwork. Ambitious. He laughed, then waited. That was the thing about Lucas. He always waited for the answer. I thought about Baltimore, the wedding, the terrace, the way he had recognized me without trying to define me. Yes, I said. His expression softened. Yes. Dinner. One dinner. No contracts, no alliance representatives, and absolutely nobody discusses family voting shares over appetizers. Agreed. I lifted my coffee toward him. Then I choose dinner. Lucas tapped his cup gently against mine. For years, other people had decided what I was, what I should hide, and what my future needed to look like. Being chosen had sounded dangerous because I thought it meant surrendering another piece of myself. Lucas had taught me something different. Someone could choose to stand beside you without choosing for you. And for the first time, I was not waiting for permission to become myself. I already had.